The crash site. The cold wind moved across the empty land as the night grew darker, and the sky above was filled with stars and smoke and broken metal pieces falling from the sky. Like fire rain, Captain Rayan walked alone through the ruined colony. His boots sinking into the soft ash. The ground under him cracked and burned, and the air smelled like war and death and old blood. He was tired, his gun heavy in his hand, his heart beating slow and strong, and his eyes scanning the shadows around him for movement. There was a sound ahead, not loud, but strange, like a soft hum, mixed with a cry like something alive and scared, hiding in the dark. He moved closer, his body low, his steps careful and quiet. And then he saw the crash. It was not a human ship. It was something alien, large and silver, and broken in half, smoke rising from it, and fire glowing inside like breath from a dying dragon. Rayan aimed his weapon and stepped forward, the metal under his boots hot and sharp, and inside he saw a figure crawling, weak and slow, covered in dust and blood. The figure turned and looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly, her skin pale blue and marked with silver lines, her body thin but strong and shaking from pain. Then she whispered in a voice almost too soft to hear, "Please don't kill me, human." Rayan froze. He had seen aliens before, tall and cold and full of hate, never begging, never afraid, and never soft like this. Tried to move but fell, and her hand reached out, her fingers curled and shaking like a leaf in the wind. "I am not your enemy," she said, her voice broken like glass underfoot. He said nothing, just looked at her and felt something strange, like this was not war anymore, but something different, something new. He walked closer slowly, his gun still raised, her eyes following him, not angry, not proud, only tired and sad and full of fear. "Why are you here?" he asked. She did not answer right away, her breath heavy, her chest rising and falling like a bird with a broken wing. Then she said, "I ran away. I had to. They wanted me to do something I could not do, so I crashed. I am sorry." Rayan looked at the ship and back at her, his mind full of questions but no answers came. He tied her hands with a broken cord from his gear bag and pulled her close to the fire from the wreckage so she would not freeze. She did not speak, just watched him with eyes that looked more human than alien. As the wind grew colder, he sat near her, the fire between them, the silence loud and long. Then she spoke again, her voice shaking like the flames. "Please don't kill me, human. I will warm your bed if I must." Rayan looked at her, shocked, her face red with shame, her eyes low, her body still and waiting. He said, "I don't need that, just answers." She nodded but said nothing more, only looked at the fire like it could save her, like it could burn away her fear. Far away in the darkness, a light flashed and fattered. Rayan looked up, his hand tight on his weapon, and something moved in the trees, something fast and silent, and watching the alien woman look too, her body stiff, her eyes wide with fear. "They are coming," she whispered, "not your people, mine." Fire popped and cracked, and the night felt like it was holding its breath. Rayan stood slowly, pulling her up with him, his gun ready, his heart loud in his chest. "You're going to tell me everything," he said. She nodded again, and this time he saw something different in her eyes, not fear, but something like trust or maybe hope. Then the wind changed. The smell of smoke turned sharp and bitter like burning oil and broken metal. Something was out there, and it was not human, and it was not friendly, and Rayan knew this was just the beginning. The fire flickered low, the stars blinked above, and the sound of footsteps in the dark was growing louder and louder and louder, a warrior's shame. Fire burned low and cold as the night passed slowly, like time was stuck, and the stars above seemed to watch in silence like old ghosts waiting for something to break. Captain Rayan sat with his back against a broken tree trunk, his weapon on his lap, his eyes on the alien girl tied beside him, her breath soft, her head bowed, her silver blue hair covering most of her face like a curtain hiding secrets. She had not spoken since the strange whisper about warming his bed, and Rayan had not asked anything more because he was still trying to understand if she was real or just a trick made by fear and war and loneliness. She was quiet but not calm. Her fingers twitched, her body shook now and then, and her eyes darted around like she was expecting the shadow to turn into death at any second. Rayan Wanted answers, but he also knew she was close to breaking, and something deep in his chest told him if he pushed too hard she would shut down like a broken drone. So he waited and watched as the fire danced and the wind moved the leaves like soft hands, brushing against the earth. After some time she looked up slowly, her eyes tired, her voice barely a whisper. Like dry leaves falling from a tree. "My name is Zira," she said. Ryan gave no answer, but inside his mind that name echoed like thunder in a quiet cave. She said nothing more for a long time, and he almost thought she had fallen asleep when her voice came again, softer this time, like a secret not meant for anyone. "I was a warrior once, proud and strong and cruel, like they taught us to be. I never looked back and I never felt guilt, but then I saw something that changed me, and I ran like a coward." Her hands shook as she said it, like the memory hurt more than her wounds, and her eyes stayed on the fire as if she could burn the past by staring hard enough. "They made us believe that humans were nothing, just weak animals, clever but dirty, soft but dangerous. But then I was sent to a small outpost to lead an attack, and I saw a human mother protect her child with her body. Even when fire from the sky," she paused and swallowed, her voice catching like a thorn in her throat, "she died. And the child cried, and I was supposed to kill him too, but I could not." My blade stopped, and I felt something inside me break. Ryan said nothing, but his grip on the weapon loosened, and his eyes narrowed with thought. "That was the moment I became wrong in their eyes," Zira said, "not weak, but broken and traitor and dirty, like the humans we were told to hate. So I left. I stole a scout ship and ran as far as I could, but they followed me because they do not forgive and they do not forget. And now I am here with you in this broken forest with the stars watching me fall." She laughed, but it was not happy. It was hollow and sharp and filled with pain. Ryan looked at her, and for the first time saw not an enemy, not a prisoner, but something else. Something lost and trying to be found. "You were trained to fight and kill, but something inside you changed," he said slowly, not sure why his voice was calm or why he felt no anger. She nodded and looked at him, and her eyes were wet with tears, but her face was calm, like the storm inside her had turned into rain. "I do not expect mercy," she said. "I do not even expect life, but I had to tell someone before they erase me." Complete. Lyrian stood and looked into the trees where the sounds had faded, but the danger was still close like a knife in the dark. He walked to her and cut the rope from her hands, and she looked at him with wide eyes, not believing what just happened. "Why?" she asked, her voice low and scared. "Because you are not a thing," he said. "You are a person, and no person should die without being heard." She touched her wrists and stared at him, and something like light returned to her eyes just for a second. Then the radio on Ryan's belt clicked, and a voice came through, full of static and fear, and "Warning, Captain. This is base. We picked up movement near your location. Not human. Repeat, not human. Hostile. Pattern confirmed. Stay alert and report over." Before Ryan could respond, Zira grabbed his arm, her grip tighter, voice sharp and urgent. "That signal is not human," she said. "I know that frequency. They are close, and they are not scouts. They are hunters, and they will not stop." The trees moved again, the shadows deeper and thicker, and the fire began to fade as cold wind wrapped around them like claws. Ryan raised his weapon and stood in front of her, his breath slow, his heart fast, and his voice firm. "Then let them come, enemies on the hunt." The night turned colder, and the wind grew louder as Ryan moved through the trees with careful steps, his eyes watching every shadow and his ears catching every whisper from the dark. Behind him, Zira followed, quiet and alert, her body still weak but her senses sharp like a hunted animal that knows the forest better than the hunter. They had left the crash site before sunrise, knowing that staying in one place meant death either from her people or his. Both sides hungry for blood and afraid of what they did not understand. Ryan held his weapon tight and checked every corner, every sound, every strange flicker of light, because Zira had said they were being followed, and he had no reason to doubt her. She walked like a ghost among the trees, her silver skin shining faintly when the moonlight touched her face, her breath slow, her hands shaking, not from fear but from something deeper. They found a broken watchtower left from the early days of the colony, and climbed inside its walls. Cracked its roof gone, but it gave them a view of the woods and a few seconds of rest. Syra sat in the corner, her back against the metal wall, her eyes closed for just a moment, and Rayan watched her, wondering how someone built to fight could look. So tired, so human. She opened her eyes and spoke, her voice low and steady. They are not just soldiers, they are hunters trained to find and kill the ones who run, the ones like me who break the rules and feel too much. Rayan did not ask how many there were or how far behind, because he already knew the answer: too many and too close. He looked at the sky and saw a soft red glow moving between the clouds, not natural, not safe, and not good. Hunters were using sky drones, small, fast, and deadly. They marked heat, they tracked scent, they never slept. "We have to move again," he said, and she nodded without a word, standing slow and holding the side of the wall for balance. Her body not ready, but her mind already moving. They climbed down into the forest and kept walking through mud and ash and broken roots until they found a river, silent and wide and black, like ink under the moon. Rayan bent down and touched the water, cold and clean. Maybe drinkable, maybe not, but they had no choice, so he filled a small bottle and handed it to Zira. She took it with a small nod and drank just enough to wet her mouth before giving it back, her hands shaking from the cold. Or maybe something worse. Then they heard a sound like metal wings and broken thunder and whispers in a language that did not belong to Earth. Rayan pulled her behind a thick tree and aimed his weapon at the sky, his eyes scanning the dark until he saw it, a drone shaped like a sharp star, moving slow and hunting. "Look!" Syra pressed herself against the tree and whispered, "They are close. They know I am alive. They smell fear and blood and memory." Rayan said nothing, just waited for the right moment, then fired once. The bullet, fast and true. The drone dropped into the water with a hiss and a spark and vanished into the black river. For a second the forest went silent. No wind, no birds, no machines, just breath and heartbeat. And then everything broke. 3 figures dropped from the trees like shadows, with blades glowing red and eyes like cold fire, their movements smooth and deadly. Rayan fired again and again, but they moved like wind, his bullets hitting air and bark and dirt. Zira screamed and pulled a broken branch from the ground, swinging it with a sharp cry, catching one of the hunters across the face. The creature stumbled, but did not fall. Rayan tackled it to the ground, wrestling the blade away and driving his knife into its side. The sound it made was not of this world, high and painful and full of hate. The second hunter came at Zira, fast, too fast, but she turned and caught its arm, her body reacting without thought, her training taking over. She twisted and kicked and knocked the blade from its hand, but the hunter grabbed her hair and pulled her down into the mud, both of them rolling and fighting like wild animals. Rayan turned just in time to see the third hunter leap from the trees, aiming for him. With both blades ready to strike, he rolled to the side and fired one last shot, the bullet hitting the hunter in the chest, sending it flying into a tree with a crash of bone and metal. Breathless and covered in dirt and blood, Rayan stood over the hunter. He stabbed and looked around. Zira sat beside the one she fought, its body still, her own hands cut and bruised, and her face filled with something between anger and sorrow. "We have to go now," she said. "More will come. They always come in waves, and this was just the first." Rayan nodded and helped her up, their bodies weak, their hearts racing, but their feet still moving, because stopping was not an option. In the dirt beside the dead hunter, a small device blinked once, then again, and then a voice spoke from it, clear and cruel. "Hybrid is with the human. Eliminate them both. Trust or trap." The forest no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a cage full of teeth and shadows and old breath from creatures that did not forget the scent of blood. Rayan moved fast but careful, his hand wrapped around Zira's wrist, pulling her through thick vines and fallen trees, her steps uneven, her legs shaking, but still moving. Behind them the blinking device still echoed the cruel voice again and again. "The hybrid is with the human. Eliminate them. Both eliminate them. Both eliminate them both." The sound stayed in his mind like a nail in soft wood. They stopped near a broken tunnel, old and forgotten, covered in vines and darkness, and half swallowed by the ground. Without a word they crawled inside. The earth cold and wet like a grave swallowing them. Hold the ceiling low, the air thick, the only sound their breath and distant. Hum of machines above. Arayan dropped down against the wall, his weapon pointed toward the entrance, his body tense, his mind rushing. Shira sat across from him, arms around her knees, her head low, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark like two moons drowning in storm water. She spoke after a long silence, her voice soft like falling ash. They will not stop until one of us is dead. Rayan looked at her, not with anger, not with fear, but with a question buried in silence. Why me? He asked, his voice flat, but his eyes sharp. Why come to me? Why trust me? Why not run somewhere else, hide in space, disappear in a world where no one knows you? Shira raised her head, and in her eyes was something heavy, something old like chains around the heart. Because I saw the way you looked at me when I begged. He said nothing, but the memory burned in his chest. You did not see a monster, you saw someone scared and lost and broken. I saw that in your eyes, and I knew you would not kill me, not yet, maybe not ever. Rayan kept his weapon up, but inside something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something. Close she leaned back against the stone, her voice changing, just a little, a whisper of strength, hiding behind every word. I was trained to kill, to lead, to obey. I was never taught how to feel or forgive or hope, but the war changed things, and now I do not know what I am. Rayan breathed deep, the tunnel cold air cutting through the warmth of his skin like watered down steel. Then he said something he had not said to anyone in years. Something really. Used to believe in the war. I used to think humans were right and strong and brave, but after everything I saw, I am not sure who the real enemy is anymore. Exira looked at him, and for the first time her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close, a small shape of light in the middle of a long dark road above them. The sound of drones moved again, sweeping the sky like metal vultures, scanning the earth for heat and life and fear. Rayan looked up, then back at Zero. Can't stay here long. Once they find the dead hunters, they will track our heat and movement. We need to move before night falls. Again Syra stood slowly, her hand brushing against the wall to steady herself, her body still weak, her breath short, but her eyes focused. I know a place, she said soft, but sure, an old human station near the ridge, abandoned long ago. It has underground levels and shielded walls. They will not find us there, not fast at least. Rayan did not ask how she knew the place or why. She spoke like she had walked those halls before. He just nodded and followed. They moved through the tunnel until it opened into a shallow cave filled with moss and dust and strange roots, glowing faintly like tiny stars caught in the ground. As they stepped outside, the sun was low, turning the sky orange and red and gold like fire on slow burn. Zira pointed toward a rocky path that climbed into the hills, and Rayan followed without words, because words were starting to lose meaning in this place of broken truth and twisted loyalty. They walked for hours through hard ground and thin air, every step a test, every sound a warning, every breath a reminder that death still walked just one step behind them. As they neared the ridge, Zira stopped and turned her head, her ears sharp, her eyes wide and scared. Something is coming, she said, but not from behind, from ahead. Rayan crouched and raised his weapon, scanning the rocks and trees and air around them, and then he saw a small blinking light deep in the trees. Not red, not hunter, not alien, but green, a human tracker. They found me, he whispered. No, she said quickly. They found me. They know I am with you. They know you chose to protect me. Rayan looked at the hills, then at Zira, then at the green blinking light, and in that moment he knew the trap was not behind them. It was waiting ahead. He stood slowly, weapon still raised, voice still, calm, eyes still burning. Then we break the trap together, the hybrid truth. The wind grew heavier as they reached the top of the ridge, the sky behind them glowing with fading light, while ahead only fog and silence waited like a trap with no chaperone. Moved with steady steps, eyes scanning every rock, every broken tree, every sound that felt too still, too perfect. And too wrong. Shira followed close, her breath sharp, her skin colder, her face quiet, but her eyes full of something she had not yet said, something that sat heavy in the space between them. Abandoned station came into view, hidden under twisted vines. and cracked steel, its roof half buried in dirt, its entrance open like a broken mouth. They entered without speaking, the inside dark and dry, filled with dust and shadows, and the smell of forgotten motionless. Rayan secured the door with a broken pipe, locking them in for now, while Zyra moved to the center of the room, her hands shaking as she touched the cold floor. "This place was once alive," she said, her voice flat like memory, too old to hold warmth, filled with voices and choices and orders now. "Only ghosts remain." He looked at her, waiting for the truth he knew was crawling inside her, ready to spill like light breaking through old glass. Ira sat down slowly, her knees pulled close, her arms wrapped tight around herself like she was trying to hold her body from falling apart. I was born not on my planet, and not on yours," she said slowly, each word like a stone dropped into deep water. "I was made in a lab in orbit far above the war, above the lies, above everything. I was made to be." Bath Rayan blinked but said nothing, his breath quiet, his weapon resting against the wall as if it too was listening. "Mother was human," she continued, "a prisoner, a scientist, a woman who believed life could be more than sides and blood and orders. She was forced to work with them, with the enemy, with my father. He was not cruel, but he was loyal, and in his loyalty, he believed something new could be created, something powerful, something better. They used their science, their machines, their hope, and they made." Morayan moved closer, sitting near the wall across from her, his hands calm, but his mind spinning like a storm without wind. Zyra looked at him, and in her face was no shame, only a silent plea to be seen, not just judged. "I was raised in cold rooms and bright lights, taught to fight, taught to lead, taught to survive, but never taught to feel or dream or belong. I was different. And they knew, and I knew, and the day I saw the human child cry and live while his mother died, I knew I could not be what they made." Mesh looked down, and her voice grew thin like thread pulled too tight. "So I ran." Rayan leaned forward and asked quietly, "Why now? Why Earth? Why me?" "Because," she said with a breath that sounded almost like pain, "they sent word that my mother was still alive, hidden on Earth in a place only a few knew about, and I wanted to find her before they did, before they erased her. The way they want to erase me." The silence after her words felt long, and Rayan stood and walked across the room, then stopped near a control panel, broken and dark and filled with old dust and cracked wires. He looked back at her and asked, "What will happen to you if they catch you?" "They will destroy me," she answered, "not just my body, but my memory, my story. They will erase me like a mistake that never existed." "If humans catch you?" he asked again. She laughed, but there was no joy, only tired air. "They will study me, or fear me, or use me like a weapon in another war. And when I am no longer useful, they will destroy me too." Rayan looked at her, then looked at the sky through a broken roof beam, stars blinking like silent watchers who refused to choose a side. "You are not a weapon," he said slowly. "You are not a mistake. You are a bridge, and maybe the only one left that can show both sides what it means to be more than a soldier." She stared at him, eyes wide, unsure if his words were real or just kindness dressed like hope. Before she could speak, the ground shook, and the station lights blinked once, then again, then turned. "Redan. Alert signal, human frequency, but code black, high security, high risk, shoot on sight." Rayan grabbed his weapon and looked at the blinking terminal, reading the message again and again. "They are coming," he whispered. Zyra stood slowly, her body tense, her hands clenched, her face no longer afraid, but ready. "We have to leave now," she said. "If they find this place, they will surround it, and we will not get a second chance." Orion moved to the back door, forcing it open with metal strain. The path behind, filled with thick fog and cold night air. They stepped outside and ran down the old path, not toward escape, but toward the unknown, toward the only place left she believed her mother might still be. And behind them, in the red glow of the station walls, a second alert flashed. New message, not from humans, not from aliens, but from something else. Hybrid confirmed location. Logged, preparing strike team, run or die. The sky turned black like ink, spreading over fire, and the stars began to vanish behind thick clouds that moved too fast, too heavy, and too alive with something unnatural. Rayan and Zyra ran through the forest, The ground wet beneath them, the trees shaking from the weight of machines above as the earth groaned under metal wings. Fog wrapped around them like hands pulling at their legs, blinding their path, turning every step into a guess and every breath into a question behind them. The station was gone, erased in a single flash of silent light. No fire, no explosion, only absence. Like it had never been built, like no one had ever hid there, like no one had ever spoken the truth within its walls. They did not speak, they only moved fast and without plan, following the broken path Zira remembered from dreams and maps and stories told in the cold, dark rooms of her childhood. Each time she stumbled, Rayan caught her. Each time he slowed, she pulled him forward, as if her body knew this path was not for one, but for two. They reached a hill covered in ash and roots, shaped like fingers reaching out of the ground, like the dead were trying to rise and speak and scream. Zira dropped to her knees, gasping, her hands pressing into the dirt, her skin glowing faintly like heat beneath ice. "Something is wrong," she whispered, her voice cracking like glass struck too many times. Rayan crouched beside her, eyes searching her face, hands ready to help, but unsure where to touch, unsure what to stop, unsure what had begun. Zira closed her eyes, her body trembling like a wire stretched to its final thread. Her breath fast and sharp, her back arching as a soft light began to rise from her skin. "This is not pain," she said between breaths. "This is change." Orion stepped back only slightly, his hand still reaching, but his eyes wide, his mind spinning through fear and wonder and questions that had no names. "What is happening to you?" he asked, the words dry in his throat. "I do not know," she answered, her voice distant and strange, like it came from beneath the ground or above the sky, or from something not born but built. "They told me the hybrid genes were unstable. They said my blood could shift if pushed too far, if threatened too long, if scared too deep." Her hands dug into the earth, her eyes turning silver, and then white, and then nothing, just light pouring from within her like stars melting through skin. Rayan moved closer, wrapping his arms around her, trying to steady her body, trying to bring her back from whatever edge she was reaching for. "You are not alone," he said, his voice firm like stone in storm, his arms holding her like an anchor in rising tide. The light inside her dimmed slowly, the shaking stopped her. Eyes returned, and her hands released the dirt, like it had told her something she finally understood. She looked at him, her face wet, her voice barely more than breath. "It is starting, and I cannot stop it." Rayan did not ask what it meant, because in her eyes he saw the truth. Her body was no longer only hers, her mind no longer only thought like theirs, her blood no longer belonged to any one world. She was changing, and with that change came power and danger. Choice from above. The sound of machines returned louder, closer, no longer searching but hunting, no longer scanning but closing in. "We have to move," he said, pulling her up, holding her steady as her legs found strength again, as her body remembered how to stand. "There is a place," she whispered, barely louder than the wind, "an old signal bunker left from the first war. It is deep underground, it is shielded. We can hide there, maybe finish what is starting." They moved again through the trees, through silence and storm, through cold and fear and rising heat, as the sky roared with engines and warnings and weapons that did not miss. The ground ahead cracked, a new ship landing, without fire, without sound, just impact and smoke and hunger. They changed direction, turning west toward a river that had dried long ago, its bones now sharp, its path a perfect trail for those who had nothing left but speed and silence behind them. The machines landed and opened their mouths, releasing soldiers, not alien, not human, something new, something tall and gray, with faces that looked like broken helmets and eyes that burned blue. Rayan looked back only once, then kept running, because to look too long was to stop, and to stop was to DX. Zira ran beside him, her body shaking again, but this time not from fear, this time from something awakening, like thunder in her chest, like lightning in her blood. They reached the broken edge of a cliff, too high to climb, too wide to cross, too deep to fall. Rayan turned, weapon raised, ready to fight, ready to fall, ready to protect one more time. Zira stepped forward, her hand out, her voice loud and full of something no one had ever taught Harry. Will not run anymore. And then her body began to glow again, brighter than before, stronger than memory, louder than war. The last choice, the wind stopped moving, the trees stopped shaking, even the machines in the sky held still, like the world itself was waiting to see what she would become. Asira stood at the edge of the cliff, her arms stretched slightly, her face turned toward the sky, her silver hair moving slow like it floated in water, and not Ariane stood behind her, weapon tight in his hands, but no longer aimed, not at her, not at the enemy, not even at the sky, because something had changed and he could feel it in the ground, in the silence in her. Her skin glowed like fire under the surface, her eyes no longer just eyes but windows to something ancient and new, something not born from war, but from choice. Below the cliff, the machines gathered their legs, moving without sound, their bodies still but watching, their faces covered in steel, their arms ready with weapons that did not forgive. Asira took a step forward, her feet inches from the drop, her voice rising clear and strong like it had never been used before, like the first word of a new language. You hunted me, you called me broken, you tried to erase me, but I am still Harian. Felt the air shift, felt the heat rise, not burning, but alive, like the edge of lightning, like the calm before something impossible. She turned to him, her face soft, her voice only for him this time. You stayed when no one else would. You believed when I could not. You gave me a name when they gave me numbers and tests in silence. He wanted to speak, wanted to stop her, wanted to ask if this was the end or the beginning, but the words stayed in his mouth, as if his voice knew this was not his moment to speak. Sky darkened, not with clouds, but with energy thick and swirling as the machines below prepared to fire. Not with rage, but with order, not with hate, but with common. Asira raised both hands slowly, and the wind returned swirling around her like it knew her, like it had waited for this moment. Her hair rising, her body no longer shaking, but steady and sure. Machines fired light, shot upward like beams of death, but stopped inches from her body, like glass against a shield that could not be seen, but was fully there. She did not move, but everything around her did. The ground cracked, the trees bent, the air sang, and the energy inside her pushed outward like a wave without water, without end. Machines below sparked and fell, not from damage, but from something deeper, something reaching inside and shutting them down like a switch turned off by truth. Asira dropped to her knees, her hands sinking into the dirt, her eyes dim, but still full of light, not gone, just lowered like a flame resting after storm. Ryan rushed to her, caught her before she fell, his hands warm on her skin, her breath shallow but still strong, her heart beating fast and clear. You stopped them, he said, his voice shaking, not from fear, but from awe. You stopped all of them. She smiled, her eyes blinking slowly, her voice almost soft enough to vanish. Not stopped, only reminded. They were not made to choose, they were made to follow, and I showed them what choice looks like. Arayan held her close, looking at the sky now, clear and silent and wide open, like the war had stepped back, like the stars had made room for something new. From the trees a sound came, not loud, not fast, just slow and careful. A small human figure stepped into the light, dirty and thin, but walking with purpose, eyes wide with wonder. Ryan stood, placing himself between the figure and Asira, but the figure stopped and raised a small hand, voice trembling but brave. I came to find Harian. Looked closer and saw the child, a girl, no older than 7, eyes green like the forest, skin pale like the sky before storm, and hair like Asira's, only shorter, only softer. Asira sat up, her breath catching, her eyes filling with something that had no name, only feeling, only memory, only hope. Reached out, the child ran forward, and for the first time since the crash, since the forest, since the hunt, there was no weapon, no fear, no voice raised in warning. There was only arms around arms and silence wrapped in warmth. Ryan watched them both, unsure what this meant, unsure what came next, but knowing deep down that this was the answer he had not known he was seeking. Child looked up at Asira and whispered something soft, something that made the wind hold still again. Are you my mother? Asira touched her cheek, her voice steady like stone and stars and dreams. Yes, and I will never leave you again. The sky above them stayed Quiet the forest did not speak, the machines remained still, and somewhere deep in the ground, the war finally went quiet. Rayan turned away and looked out over the cliff where the sun now rose, painting the land gold and warm and full of breath. And behind him, the first family of a new world stood, holding each other, not as human or alien or weapon or soldier, but as something else, proof that the war was over and something better had begun.